The whole idea behind blue zones is to, given that between 6 and 15% of how long we live is dictated by our genes, the other 85% is something else, is to find people who have lived the longest and identify their common denominators or the correlates, what seems to be driving longevity. And the places I found these blue zones, there are about 15 times more centenarians, about 15 times more. But that's probably not because they have better human biological machines than we do. It's more of an artifact that more people are getting to a healthy 80 and more getting to a healthy age 90, and therefore there are more left over to make it to 100. So the reality is, if you want to make it to 100 right now,
yeah, I do.
You have to have won the genetic lottery. You'll come along. This bridge 2 and bridge 3 may give us something that makes it more commonplace, but the average maximum life expectancy of humans living in the first world, if you do everything right, is about 94, about 96 for females, maybe 92 or 93 for males, if you have an average set of genes. There are some people who have an amazing set of genes, and they made their chance of making it to 100, go up 3 or 4 fold. But what most of us can realistically shoot for, given the state of science right now, is about 94. And the people I found do it better than anybody else. And that is the body of wisdom I try to convey.
I get it. You and I are about the same age. I'm 63 or just...
I'm 63.
63 as well. Okay. So, when I think about this is my calculations. And for folks listening here, you could do your own math. If in fact I can make it to 93, and I have every confidence that you and I can, that's 30 years of progress ahead of us. 30 years during the most rapid acceleration of AI and biotech ever. And so I'm counting on that a lot. But having said that, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I've got that runway. And so blue zones is definitely part of that critical part.
So there's 2 pools of demographers out there when it comes to longevity. There's one pool, like Jay Olshansky, he's an American, he's very well known, who will show you that since about 1840, there's almost been a straight line increase in life expectancy of about 2.5 years per decade. We've seen big leap and drops. The year penicillin was discovered, we had the big leap, and the year that COVID happened, we had a drop. But it's about 2.5. So we're 63. We should get another 3 decades. That's 7.5 years of extra life. So I just said it's 94. We ought to be able to make 101. Just if progress continues. There is another pool of demographers who calculate the rate of discovery and of genetic discovery. For example, and when you add that sort of calculus in, the curve may look like a hockey stick as opposed to a straight line. And in that case, right now we know the capacity of the human machine is 122 years and 4 months.
That's the eldest well-documented individual.
Right, Marie Calmé from France. Theoretically, the human could go past that, but we just don't know of an example.
Yeah. And it's really strange given, hundreds of millions and billions of people, you would think that there would have been some outliers, somebody else who had gone past that. And that's, a lot of people use that as the argument for saying, nope, can't get there. If there were genetic variations, if there were lifestyle variations, someone, in the larger the population of humans on Earth, someone should have pushed beyond that.
Yeah, so our environment is constantly changing, and the way evolution works is species adapt to a changing, to a limited resources, but also a changing environment. And if we were quadrupeds, if walking around on 4 legs with an IQ of 50 points like a Neanderthal, we probably wouldn't do very well in the current environment. You need the younger generations to die off and get out of the way for the next generation in order for the species to evolve and respond to a changing environment. That is why we die. There's a good reason our species die in an evolutionary context.
I want to dive into that a little bit because it's something that affects my thinking about this a lot, which is why do we die? Why don't we continue? And I think for folks to understand this, it really goes. We need to go back to 100,000 years ago, right? As hominids. So Homo sapiens are what, a couple 100,000 years old as a species, and you have. I'm speaking to the person who knows more about this, way more than I do. So correct me where I'm wrong, but I think we used to go into puberty probably at age 11 or 12 back then, and you'd be pregnant by 12 or 13. And by the time you were 26 or 27, you were a grandparent. And before food was abundant, you didn't want to steal food from your grandchildren's mouths. And so the best thing you could do was die. And so there's no selective pressure, no advantage for having people living longer. Is that correct?
Yes, I think generally. There's been about 25,000 generations of the human species, and for about 99.8% of that, life expectancy has been 30. Mm-hmm. For every mammal, whether it's a mouse or an elephant, we live about 2.5 times the age of what we call procreative success. So procreative success is defined as not only having children, the age of procreation, 2.5 times the age of procreation. So for every mammal, as soon as you start having babies, you live about one more generation until you have grandbabies, and then another half a generation, and then you die off. And the idea being, evolutionarily speaking, obviously our offspring need us to survive, but our grandchildren don't need us as much. Grandparents help somewhat. So there's an evolutionary rationale for you to be around to see your grandkids survive, and then you're kind of irrelevant in the scheme of things.
Or you tax on the family unit. You're a drag.
Historically, yes.
So interesting, because I had kids at 50. I have 2 boys now who are 13, and I think about that as being actually a pro longevity part. I mean, they keep me energized. I'm excited about them. I want to see support them and growing. Is that is there any merit to this idea that having kids later in life, choosing to have kids later in life, is a good thing?
Maybe. And we know that the cohort of Americans most likely to reach age 100 are women who have babies after age 40. And we don't know if that's because if you can still have babies after age 40, you're more physically fit, or if it's because having babies that late forces you to stay more mentally and physically active to make sure your babies survive. But yes, in blue zones, most of the people making it to 100 have had children, indeed are grandchildren and even great-grandchildren.
Fascinating. So you said something earlier, which I think most people don't realize. A lot of folks are like, man, oh man, my parents died in their 60s or 70s, and therefore I'm probably not going to live much longer than that. And the numbers on how much of your longevity is genetic versus lifestyle are pretty shocking. Can you repeat what you said earlier?
Yeah. For a population, it's somewhere between 6 and 15% of how long we live is dictated by our genes. But the way to think of it is you have to think of a continuum, and there's a sliver of people on one end of the distribution curve who will, run marathons and eat whole food, plant-based, and have great social network, and they'll be dead at 40 because they have some weird cancer. And then at the other end of the distribution curve, and we hear about them all the time, people are, drink 4 drinks a day and smoke, and they make it to 100. But for those of us with an average set of genes, or maybe even a standard deviation beyond the average, genes just aren't that important in how long we live. So the good news is you could have parents who died at 60 and, you could still make it to 95. And you could also have parents who made it to 95 and you could be dead at 60. So the point is you have to pay attention to what you do on this planet, not what you were given.